day. And it concerns me because it makes me wonder. Now, when I was young and I moved out in California, I was like 15 and a half. And not long after that did they develop a um, system of rent control where landlords couldn't increase the rent at like 1 or 2% a year, which landlords were really mad about that. It was like this new law. And it was supposed to be like according to the cost of living. And that way, people could, still afford to live in their place, even if they raised it just a tiny percentage, like every year or whatever it was back then. I think it was every year. And most landlords didn't even do that. They just kept renting to you as long as you weren't a problem or anything and you paid rent on time. The biggest trick was paying the rent on time and never getting late charges or excuses or anything like that. Just pay it. And if you're in the position to pay rent in advance, do it. It does make for a better situation. I mean, my last house, I paid her in advance all the time and was only late 24 hours one time during the pandemic when all the ATMs locked up. And I notified her. I had 3/4 of the money in cash and I was trying to access the rest out of the bank and couldn't get it. Um, and uh, anyway, which I believe was actually my daughter's payroll, we couldn't get in. We went to like 10 or 15 ATMs till late at night and couldn't get in nothing. So anyway, but it was better the next day. I figured everybody drew all the money out of the bank because of the huge emergency. Because now we didn't think it was a joke anymore, or some government scam about the pandemic. Because at first it was like, is this true or not true? I just find it really hard to believe. I kind of thought we were going to be bombed and they just wanted us all to stay in our houses. Um, uh, but anyway, hey, how you doing? But anyway, I've been hearing this so much in just the last 30 days, from strangers, from people that are acquaintances that I kind of know. And it's, wow, my landlord's going to raise the rent. Now, when I when I had my house over there with the pool, the last house I had in that really nice area and everything, at Uptown Station, all those houses were independently owned, and some were put through real estate brokers or whatever, and they didn't permit Airbnb or any temporary rentals at all there. No short term, no temporary seasonal rentals at all. Um, uh, they had an HOA there, so that was under their regulations and rules. So actually, where I was actually rented, because she originally tried to rent to me as a seasonal type thing, telling me my lease was only 3 or 4 months. And I was like, who has a 3 or 4 month lease? But that was never on my lease. My lease had no end to it, no expiration. And actually, the documents I signed were for purchase, because she was a dummy. And uh, and she altered that when I got my copy, um, after I had already signed it. But anyway, people are tricky. But anyway, I wouldn't buy that piece of crap anyway. Bad investment. Um, One, they were just too old, and they're not built as well. There's 200-year-old houses that will stand for years and years and years versus stuff that's built in the 70s and 80s that just isn't built well and won't last hundreds of years. But anyway, so uh, there was a guy. He was deciding to move. He hadn't lived there that long, and he was going through a real estate brokerage for that unit. Military, and they love to rent to the military here. The first thing sometimes when you call for a property for rent, the first thing they're going to say is, "Are you military?" And I find that discriminative. But the first thing you're going to ask me is, "Am I military?" Because obviously, if I say no, then you have zero interest in me. Why? Because military has some kind of guarantees and warranties. If their guys rent from somebody, they'd get an additional security deposit that the military will pay if they damage the place. Um, they guarantee the rents. I don't know if they pay the rents, for 3 months at a time, or just the term of the contract, or how they do that. But pretty much it's guaranteed rent, and landlord never has to worry about payment. Um, and that's important. I mean, it's just like a job. You want your paycheck, and a lot of people don't understand that. When you're late on the rent, the landlord really needs that money for whatever reason it may be, for their retirement, for their mortgages on other properties, for their own living expenses. They're there like a job, just like you go to your job. And so it's kind of a you know that's the kind of situation it is. But this guy, he said to me, yeah, that I'm military, and my wife and I, and they're a real nice couple. And he was probably 30, real clean cut, respectable guy, and real soft spoken. And uh, he says, I'm moving because the real estate brokerage just rented to me like 5 months ago, and they're telling me they want to jack the rent up, uh, another $500. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, so you know what I did? I went online and I looked at places to buy. He says, and I got this place out in the country with a bunch of acres and everything, and I just bought it online. I said, without even seeing it or anything? He said, no, didn't even bother. And I said, well, how are you going to do that with the military? He says, I'm getting transferred out there. And he said, I've had enough. I'll just own it. And military gets like, I think it's one, it may be forever, I don't know. But they get at least one, like, free financing or something like that, um, to buy a house. It's some kind of deal where they could just buy a house easier than, the average Joe can. And, which is something I try to get my daughter to do with her daddy. And, because, we were going to buy a house years ago. And they welcomed us, at Eglin Federal Credit Union and all that. The only problem we were having then is a few of the houses we looked at to purchase in the Fort Walton, Destin area did not have a metal roof, and that was a new thing. They had a requirement with that particular bank that they wouldn't finance a house unless it had a metal roof. And it's like, okay, so we'll buy it and then we'll put a metal roof on it. And they're like, no, it has to have an existing metal roof because we're just not going to do it. And it was like, well, so that was kind of strange, but I wish she had taken advantage of that before he moved to California, which I've told her over and over again. I'm like, take care of your daddy, go get a place with him. He's got that military thing still he's never used, and get a house so you have a really nice future, because that was a much better option than I could give her, because he had that in his back pocket, and now it'll probably be never used or used up, because I know some of the people he went to go be with. But anyway, um, uh, so that really concerns me. Here's a military guy, and a landlord is all of a sudden telling him, well, we're just going to jack your rent up, $500 in less than 6 months, um, of living there. And you know, I guess they just, see if the military will pay for it or whatever. This guy said, no, forget it. You're being a jerk. But now I'm hearing it from people that aren't military, a lot. One of my coworkers, which I didn't get friendly with a lot of people at work, um, at this current job I've been at the fine dining. I just kind of stay to myself, do my job, and get out of there. Um, I'm tired of trying to make friends and be nice and stuff. I just there's so much of this job thing where people don't even want to say hi to you and you don't even know their names. It's pitiful. But so I just stay to myself. But anyway, one of the girls that I worked with, she was a server. And servers don't get paid much. Um, Around this area, there were like I think a bartender was like 4.80 an hour. Yeah. And they I think now it's like 7 an hour. I'm not sure how that goes, the tipping wage in Florida. I looked it up the other day. But uh it's really low, you know. I mean, what are you going to buy on that? There's no guarantee that people are going to tip you, super good. Trust me. There's countries that they don't even believe in tipping, like the Filipinos. That's just beyond them. There's no such thing as tipping, because that's the way their country is. So when they come here, they don't think they're doing anything wrong. Um, so when you're on a tipping wage and people aren't tipping, and then there's others that will tip you, $50 or $100 or $30, just because you did a good job, no matter how much their check was. That's a blessing, but I mean, it just kind of basically levels out to minimum wage before it's all said and done. There are some exceptional jobs where people are going to make 300 to 400 in tips at night, um, but they're also going to work their booty off. But you know, the thing is that this girl, she says, she's just a waitress. She gets like 4 or 5 tables a night to work in her section because this place is so overstaffed. I don't know why they do that. I mean, if every meal was $100, I could see, but they'll have so many servers on a shift, whether it's busy or slow. I mean, you're talking 12 to 18 servers, so they get 3 or 4 tables for a section the whole time they're there, and you know they're gonna get seated, but it doesn't mean their whole section will be full all night long either, because it's not. They get one table here, and they get one table here, so it makes it tough. So if you're lucky enough to walk away with 50 in tips or 100 in tips in a night, you're doing real good. But she was telling me, man, I've got this place. It's not even like a 1 bedroom. She says it's so small. She says, and I'm paying 1,500 a month. I said, what? She says, yeah. And she says, my landlord came to me the other day and said, I'm going to have to raise the rent pretty soon. And she's like, oh, please don't. I mean, you have to understand that, you know, in the old days, people were good about giving regular raises. It might be, a dime raise, a quarter raise, a 50-cent raise. And, you know, every year, you got a bonus or something if you did your job well, and promotions were coming and all that stuff. And it's not like that anymore. It's about like what you're hired for and what you're being paid is just going to be about what you're going to be making, unless somebody recognizes you or you opt for another job in that company that maybe pays a little more and might be not anywhere near your field or something you'll just be willing to try to do. So don't think that raises come regular, just like raises in rent or utilities. I don't know if there is a rent control in Florida. There was in California way back when I moved out of the house. And shortly thereafter, 6 months or a year, they developed a rent control system. Like I say, I think it was like 1% or 2% a year, according to living costs. So if the living costs didn't go up, they couldn't raise it. And you had people to call for that and everything, if they did. if they tried to be shady. Um, you know, um, Now it's like the option where if your lease runs out, then they want to just, run it up. We rented out at Eglin, my daughter and I. She was on that lease because he wanted everybody on that lease. Even if you had a dog, cat, human, whatever, everybody that was inside that unit had to be on the lease. The next house, that was not true. But she denied my daughter on that lease. And I was like, God, if I died, they'd just put her in the street. And I really wanted to have her on the lease, but she was under 18 at that time. But that one lease out there at Eglin, um, you know, I think the lease it was 3 or 6 months at a time. And then what he would do is like every 3 months, he would raise the rent like $20, $30. But he did it to everybody, not just me. I'm not saying he just pointed it out at me. He did it to all the tenants there because, we were all kind of, friends. And I'd say, hey, did you get that thing from, you know, I can't think of the guy's name. It was the landlord. He was a dentist. I was like, did you get a thing to? And my neighbor was like, to raise the rent? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh yeah, everybody got it. And I'm like, why? And he said, and some of those tenants, had been there for several years. The couple next to us, I think, was there 3 or 4 years. The guy in the corner, he was there like 5 or 7 years. Um, and uh, so they were long termers. But yeah, and I'm like, so what do you name? The guy's name was Goodpaster. That was the landlord's name. He's deceased now. He had throat cancer and was real sick for years. Nice guy though. Um, but anyway, uh, I called the landlord and I said, well, what's the deal with the raise? And he said, pay it or don't. Got real mean all the time. Pay it or don't. I'll evict you by Christmas. I was like, whoa. All right, thank you, sir. And that was really crappy. And but what do? You just pay it or don't. Um, and you just go, damn. Are they going? And the first thing you think is, are they going to do it every 3 months, like the Jack in the Red? You know, well, yeah, he was doing it like that. Like every 3 or 4 months go by, he'd be jacking it up again, another 20 or 30 bucks, and it was like, geez. After the second time, for sure he's just going to keep doing it, right? So I think he did it to me like 3 times, and I had already started looking for places, and I had found a really neat place closer to mine and my daughter's work, in the Fort Walton area up at Uptown Station. It was really nice, and I said, man, she's gonna love this with the pool and everything. And I didn't even take her to go see it or anything. I just bought it and then just handed her a key and drove her down there and let her open the door. And I was so proud and so excited. I was like, oh, this is going to be so great. Less traffic, less gas, closer to work. And it has a swimming pool and patios and balconies. And she just loved this. At both places at once because I didn't want to, maybe I wanted to take a little time. So, and I wanted to make sure the other place was immaculate clean and steam clean again and stuff like that. I had just painted that whole place on the inside, and most of it at my cost. But that was okay, Um, but anyway, so it really concerns me. I don't know if they have a rent control in the state of Florida. I think they really, 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 really need one, and if they have one, they need to start enforcing it because uh, it's not fair to people. I don't care young or old. Like I say, if you're at a job How often are you getting a raise? Because it's not as often as these landlords are trying to raise these rents, and it would be very hard for a younger person, to be working a job, and then all of a sudden the landlord wants to jump that rent $500 or $700, like this server was telling me, and it's like, you can't even trust these landlords. They're going to do it. So who is governing this in the state of Florida? I mean, they need to do something. Um, you know, uh, you know, invent some sort of rent control system and make it accessible to renters to be able to easily call or file a complaint with or whatever to stop all this insanity. You're also getting a lot of tourists that are coming from across the states, like say California, where rent starts in a welfare apartment for $5K a month for a bachelor pad. And I'm talking a bachelor pad like doesn't have a bedroom. It's just one big giant room. Okay. And these people are coming over and they're you know what properties start at $1 million and up, just to purchase, in California, and they're coming to Florida and they're going, man, you know, uh, this property is like half or one quarter of the price of California properties. We'll just buy some of those, you know, and run them out. And so, you know, uh, they're thinking like, 5K rent. Then when they find out there's not 5K rent, but like down in Miami for the Miami Vice House, then, they'll go to about half. So you're talking like 2.5K rent they're figuring on. So they're going to come in and purchase a property and then want to jack that rent up, to, 2.5K a month to somebody that's, been paying, 1,000 or 1,500 in the last 2 years for one bedroom. And, uh, now the going rate's 2,000 a bedroom. So, at the current time, because after the pandemic thing here began. So, if you can find a place for 1,000 a month, you're darn lucky up in this area. You're darn lucky. Um, but, I mean, it's painful. It's not like your job is giving you a raise so you can accommodate that. You're not getting those raises regular or whatever. And most people will have a job that just covers the rent, just covers their gas, and just covers their food, and they're comfortable. They don't like to work any more than that, which is, a scary thing too. You've got to be able to change that. You've got to, work a second job, which that's very common in California. You won't work just one job to survive out there. It's not happening. Although their pay rate's like around 20 or so over there. That's crazy. God, if we could make $20 an hour, it'd be great for minimum wage. And, you put most of the businesses out in places like this, or even small town places like, in Arkansas and stuff like that. Owners can't afford to operate if they've got to pay employees like 20, 25 an hour. So, you know, um, our Florida payroll is stepping up, you know, by the year and stuff like that. And, like in another 4 years, it'll be, way up there to where the minimum wage, is going to be like 17 or something. But that's a ways from now. That's the problem. That's not now. Um, so, honestly, there needs to be some kind of rent control system, and that's accessible, easily accessible to a renter as a resource, and to stop the madness. Okay, you know, MOM, method of madness, mom, method of madness. Um, because it's not fair. It's not fair to the young or the old. I mean, don't think Social Security gives raises all day long either. I'm not old enough to have Social Security, but I know people that are on it, and you know, don't think it's going to be like a regular big giant raise every 6 months or every year either. So there are people that are on limited income. There are people that are not able to work, you know, because of their health and their age, and it just ends up putting them out on the street. I know some older people that I know a lady that works at Dollar Tree that is just she was long since retired, and she's a short little elderly lady, and she's like, man, I own my own house, and it's like I can't afford my house payment. They're going to put me out, you know. So I had to come back to work because my money doesn't cover it in retirement. And it's like, oh my gosh. So it hurts people all the way around. I mean, you got these big money people coming from other states and buy into the real estate out here, especially now that it's dropping too. They're really, buying in. A lot of the stuff doesn't even stay on the market, for long because I just buy it online. Um, and right now, the average wait on a sale for a property in this area is like 30 days. So they sell pretty quickly. Um, but uh, you know, it's a great concern to me. I talked to a guy a couple weeks ago that I didn't even know, and he was like, "I'm putting a bunch of stuff in storage because my landlord wants to jack the rent $700 in like a month." And it's like, "Oh my gosh, um, that's terrible." And the guy, and it's like, "Well, did you have problems with the landlord? Did you violate your lease? Were you late on your rent?" And that. Nope. Um, isn't Florida also where older people come to retire? It's always been since I was a kid. All the old Jews in California. It's just a thing. That and it's like Hawaiian shirts, sweat socks, and sandals. It's like you always know the tourists. I don't know who this is. It's like pulling up next to me. Um, but anyway, the thing is that that was like the biggest going joke, you know, and because it's the land of peace, relaxation, bikinis, you know, so you know these older Jews they could live forever on their money in Florida, um, and be happy, you know. So yeah, Florida, was always the big thing. Now I do not suggest moving to anything lower than mid Florida, and because it's an Iowa car, it looked like a woman in there. Because of insurance and pretty much cost of living. Insurance goes higher as you go down the state. It goes double when you're around the Tampa area, which is mid Florida. And then when you hit lower Florida, it's like triple. And why? Well, it's a bad investment. I mean, although my dream place in the world is like Key West or Carmel, California, um, uh, the problem is that, that it's very tropical weather down there, and it hits hard. As long as I've been alive, since a little kid, I mean, lower Florida has always been ripped to shreds in some sort of hurricane tornado thing. And insurance companies are tired of paying on it. It's like buying, a house in a flood area, which I've known people that did that. And then the insurance would finally cancel out after about the second time they paid on it. They go, "We're not paying anymore. We're not going to insure your house." And it's like, why? Well, put it on stilts or something because it's just a bad area. And it's guaranteed we're going to have to pay for another flood. So that's the problem. Insurance companies are crooks. They want to keep their money, make their money, and keep it. They don't want to pay out. My dad has always said, insurance is a really bad investment. And it's like, why? He's like, because they don't pay. And it's true. I've been screwed a couple times. On my big house got hit by a tornado. They didn't pay. I had the same insurance the 80-year-old lady that died that owned the property had. The same company, you know. So, yeah, uh, that's the biggest problem with lower Florida. But most of the rich, and it's not just Jews. We say Jews in California because they're the ones with all the money, and the next one up in line is the people from India. Okay, and not Indians that wear headdresses. I'm talking about the people from India. They're tall, darker skinned people generally, and they wear, the women wear these long dresses with the things across their face and all that. And they do belly dancing. I mean, and they drive Mercedes all day long. And they are real serious moneymakers. These are the guys that own gas stations, 7-Elevens. I mean, they have huge money. And yeah. And so, people like that, can afford to move to, Florida as long as I've been alive. And they really enjoy going to Key West or Miami or whatever. But I'm just telling you, it's a bad investment. If you can stay mid Florida or higher, you're going to be better off, especially if you're transitioning from another state, whether it's a lower price or higher price. You're better off to stay from mid Florida and above, north. Anywhere north, pretty much. There are some crappy cities, but um, you know, uh, like Ocala, there's a piece of crap. Jax, there's a piece of crap. Picola, there's a big piece of crap. Milton, there's a big piece of crap. Um, there are some places that are just not a good place to live. Or like out in Pace, unless you want to buy a horse um, and pray a lot that you're not next to a meth labber. That's all that's worth. But the rest of it's all right, you know. But your insurance is a lot cheaper if you stay mid Florida or higher. And the cost of land and everything, and renting or buying is better. You can get insurance, and you won't have trouble filing if you have to. But they're not hit as often and as hard as below mid Florida. Trust me, I've seen it on the news for years. All I know is what I read in the newspaper and see on the news, right? So, um, uh, and it takes months and years to get all that stuff processed once your property gets hit. And you might be out of your house for a year. And does your insurance pay for a hotel while you're having your house rebuilt? I mean, there's so many things. Does it pay replacement value? There is an insurance company you can get out in New York that will pay actual replacement value. So if you paid $3,000 for a TV 5 years ago, they're going to buy you another TV equivalent. Where other insurance companies are going to go, well, so that TV was only worth $100 today, so that's all we're going to pay you. So, there's a big trick everywhere. Um, but still, I mean, versus California to Florida, you can buy cheaper property in Florida than you can in California. So that's a great rental investment, or even to reside in, personal investment. But there really needs to be a point of rent control. I really think there does, for the state of Florida, like they did in California. Now, I haven't lived in California in several years, so I don't know if they still enforce all that. I'm sure that they probably do, because California doesn't play. Their legal system and everything else is pretty straight up, and tends to stay that way, or they try to even improve it some more, and it gets stricter. But, you know, as you move away from California, things become more lax. Like the first place I moved was Oklahoma, and that was very strange. That was like a time warp. That was like going back into the Twilight Zone. It was really strange. Very different, much cheaper by far. You could rent, a really nice place for 400 to 600 a month and be like at the Ritz, um, where it's not. That's not true anymore. But yeah, versus when I left California, the cheapest rent was, 1,500 a month to live in Watts. downtown LA. Why would I want to live there? You know? Jeez. Even Compton was higher. And nobody wants to live there. I know cops that didn't even want to work there. I've driven through Compton lots of times, day or night. That's a scary freaking place. I'd rather drive through downtown LA than Compton. That's right. I'd rather drive down downtown LA with two sets of door locks and the windows down at 2 in the morning than I would Compton, day or night. hmm But, but yeah, that somebody do something. Some senator or governor or whatever you are, somebody do something about the Florida rent control. It's not nice what these landlords are doing, whether they're, you know, landlords that are from Florida or they're tourists that have come and purchased here and renting to Floridians. It's not fair, you know. I know a girl who's an acquaintance of mine. I've known her for over a year. And she came from living in a storage with no car and eating ramen with ketchup poured over it. Okay, and she worked, doing maid service stuff. Today, she has a virtually new car, and um, uh, she got her driver's license back, got that straightened out, and she's former military, and she's not very old. Um, and she is working at a really high end condo place down in Destin, Florida, where she literally has like the parking permit sticker on the window of the car. She was showing it to me like, I work here. And it's like, whoa. And, she was renting a storage unit the other day. And she says, um, hell, she says, I've been living in Crestview. And I'd heard she'd moved to Crestview like 4 or 5 months ago. Somebody told me that knew her. And because I was wondering if she was okay. And I had no way getting a hold of her because my phone had broken. All my numbers were not on the phone, and I haven't had time to have that transferred over to this phone. So I was really glad to see her. But this guy had told me, oh yeah, she got a car, and then all of a sudden she just jumped and ran and moved to Crestview. And he's like, God, why Crestview? And Crestview's not cheap. Years ago it was. It was cheaper to go to Valpy, and then it was a lot cheaper to go to Crestview. You could get a nice house, 3 or 4 bedroom, for $500 a month, and it's not like that anymore. If you can get in for $1,500 a month, you're real lucky. Um, in Crestview, but yeah, she's putting everything in storage because she said she had like a batch pad there. She's like, it's not even 1 bedroom. I said, it sounds like a batch pad. She says, I don't know what it is, but it's just a room kind of thing. And she says, I rented for, I think it was 1,100 or 1,400 a month. She says, and the landlord turned around and said he wanted like 2,100 a month. And she said, forget it. I'm just moving out. I said, God, they didn't put eviction on you or anything. She said, nah. And I said, well, that's good, because as soon as they file that with the court, it's all over with. It's so hard to rent. So she just got all her stuff, loaded it in her car and took it to a storage complex and stored it. And the only good thing is that right now the hotels are getting really, really low for the first time since the pandemic started, because they kept tourist prices all year round. So right now, like I noticed over on 98, there's one hotel over there that's on the water, and I think it was like $345 a week price, which that's winter rates. It'll go up like in April, or maybe January, but yeah, off season is usually fairly reasonable. If I had the money, I'd be doing it, because that's really cheap. That's about the price of rent for the month for a place here. So if that comes with a phone, the utilities, cable TV, internet, you're saving money right there, you know. And plus, a lot of them have an onboard washateria, so it's got, security camera, whatever, and maybe a few machines there, and it's a little cheaper than going to washateria or free. And there's security and and all the bums aren't there and all that stuff, it's just parking for people that are residing there. So, that's a really cool alternative. But like I say, if I had the money, I'd just be doing it. And but right now playing the job game is just ridiculous. And maybe food and beverage is just not the answer. Now I do know that it's apparently it's going to get slower and slower, like it used to before the pandemic. It's held its own for a couple years of the pandemic, but right now it's starting to actually really truly slow down. So that kind of means most of the business won't come back until like January, where you get the Canadians and all that, the snowbirds, the retired rich folks. And then April, it'll just start booming again. But so food and beverage is going to slow down a lot, especially if you're front house. So if you're back house, you're a necessary employee, like a chef or prepper or dishwasher. But as far as front house goes, they have what they call cutting. And so if you have, 15 servers, they may cut, like 9 out in one night by the hour. And, that's the bad part. Like your landlord's going to jack your rent up, and then your job, is failing for, the winter time in Florida. It's painful. It's like, how are you going to make it, you know? Um, so you have to, seek another job or seek something that's going to, stay afloat all year round, like working at a grocery store or Walmart, or maybe doing maid service, or a city job or something, or a coffee shop. Those stay afloat all year round. And there's people that work in coffee shops and get tips. They call them baristas. They're like a coffee bartender, you know, and they make people's coffee and people tip really, 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 really good. Yeah. So, that's another alternative. But, but yeah, something needs to be done to stop all this rent raising. It really does in Florida. There's a guy I know that moved to the new apartments by the mall, the Santa Rosa Mall of Mary Esther. Where they condemned part of the mall and they built those two big new buildings, and they were supposed to be open at Christmas, and they opened earlier or something like that. And they started at 1180 for the cheapest unit. I wanted to move in there. I wanted to move in there so bad. And I had some money, but I was afraid that I wouldn't, have enough regular money to support it because of the storages and my costs, boondocking. So I needed more than that. And it wasn't time to go back on the road yet because fuel was like $5 a gallon and all that kind of stuff. And so now there's a guy over there. He's putting stuff in storage, and he's like, it's like, why? And he's like, God, I've lived there since it opened. He says, and they want to raise my rent another $800 right now. I'm like, $800? And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking that I'm going to do that. And it's like, so you do or you don't, I mean, and he has a 2-bedroom. So those were, a little bit pricey, and that's what I wanted, a 2-bedroom or bigger. So, these are things that need to be addressed immediately. There needs to be a stop put to it because people's pay is not getting raised high enough and fast enough to accommodate the insane raises of these landlords in the hundreds of dollars, not a 1% or 2%. I'm talking in hundreds of dollars at a time. We're talking raises of 500 plus a month that they're going to do or wanting to do. And if you don't want to comply, they just evict you. Because if you have one of those crappy leases, it's like a month or a 15-day noticer and stuff like that, they can put you out. And once you get an eviction in the state of Florida, it's so hard to rent. You know, a lot of the big places don't want nothing to do with you if you got one eviction in the state of Florida and you're trying to rent in Florida. You know, if it's a private owner, yeah, you'll skate. I mean, the last two places I had were private owners. Um, you know, so maybe I was just lucky. I don't know. I've never been a renting person for many, many, many years. I've owned my own houses, and you know, and that's because I'm like Mr. Fix It. You know, I can turn a wrench. I can do some things. You know, and then I know who to call to fix stuff if I can't do it. So you know, yeah, I've dug holes and replaced water lines all the way from the meter at the sidewalk. You know, um, I've done a lot of stuff. I don't do house or commercial electric. I can do car electric, but I don't do house or commercial electric at all. But and really, I don't know that I want to. But I know a lot about other stuff. I can swing a hammer, and I can pour concrete. I can rough. I can sheetrock. I can do some plumbing stuff. But you know, I owned my properties for years, and there's your next handicap. Well, you don't have any renter's credit. I would think owning a house is the best credit of all, but it's not. It'll mess you up when you try to rent stuff because you have no rental history. And so that's your next problem. They really don't want to rent to you because you have no rental history. And it's like, well, so rent to me so I'll have a rental history. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So please, whoever it is in the state of Florida that can fix this, it needs to be addressed ASAP. They need some type of rent control now because people are having to give up their places to live so that, people from out of state can move in thinking it's cheaper because they're used to 5,000 and up a month rent, and 2,000 a bedroom isn't nothing to them, coming from Texas or California or whatever. So, and these landlords that are buying in that are tourists, you know, they don't even like our cheap rent. So they're going to try to get it as high as California is, where it starts at $5,000 for bachelor pad in a welfare apartment. In a welfare apartment. The homeless welfare apartment. Man, if you're making $5K a month being a homeless welfare apartment, you're doing pretty damn good. Because I promise you, it costs you over $1,000 a month to live in a car. I promise you that. Mm-hmm. With gas and your food costs and storage and all that, that's what you're going to end up paying. Even if you have a little tiny storage. All my storages are basically commercial, except for the stuff with 67 boxes, my daughter's stuff in it, which I guess is going to end up being commercial too. Because I'm eventually just going to have to sell it off as much as it breaks my heart. But, yeah. So somebody do something, please. Help the Floridians and put in some kind of rent control and back it up to the point of where people can access it, where they can call or go online and file whatever. Do something to help the people, please, because it's abusive. Either that or to start raising payroll regular and force companies to start promoting and giving raises on a regular basis, and more than a quarter or 50 cents or $1 an hour. There needs to be some regulation on both sides, or just please at least do something to do some kind of code enforcement on rents, because it's not fair to the people. Now, the pandemic put a lot of people homeless because people want to sell when property went up in value triple the price, and so landlords jumped on it to sell. So now, here's the problem: the property's not real high like that anymore, and it's too late to really sell and make a gigantic profit. But the problem is you're getting these tourists coming in, and they want these really high rents, like where they come from, And our people are not used to that. And nobody's stopping them. Nobody's stopping them. I mean, it's really hard to turn around and have the landlord say, "Oh, I'm going to raise your rent 500, 800, $1,200 a month real soon, like in the next 30 days or the next rent day." And for you to go out and get a job, if you're, opting for a place that, you know, pays every 2 weeks, which not everybody does that. That's very archaic. Then, they've got to wait 2 weeks for a paycheck, and it may not be in time to make that rent on the first because they're going to jack it up or evict you. And it's already a bad negativity to begin with when they do opt to want to jack it up and notify you, whether it be verbal or in writing, and then you call them and say, "But why?" Well, it's like they don't care. So now you got that first negative mark because you called and said why instead of just shutting up and just putting up with it, right? That's how it's going to go. You got to think from both sides of the plate there. If you were the landlord, you're the tenant. So they've already got one against you going, "Oh my God," they got pissed off because I'm going to raise the rent. Um, so then, it's one foot out the door right there. So somebody do something, please. I'm not renting currently, so I'm speaking for all those that are. It's just stuff I'm hearing about like almost every day, at least every other day, and it breaks my heart. At people that are good working people and nice people, and landlords are just going, "I'll just jack the rent up," you know, hundreds of dollars all of a sudden. I mean, it'd be different if your landlord says, "Well, in a year, I'm gonna jack the rent up $500, so stay or don't stay." But no, this is like next month or in the next 2 months. That's really short notice. Okay, and it's so hard to move. Oh my gosh, when you have to move, I don't. I like to move in 4 week time. I like to have at least 4 weeks, and I've always told people that I've recently rent from in the past like 5 years. Um, hey, you don't have to evict me. I just need like 30 days to move for any whatever reason. Just let me know, and I'm gone. And I'll leave the place nice. And I'll pay rent. I tell them up front. Because I know I've managed property twice in my life, and there's some really crappy renters, and they leave the place so trashy it takes like a month to clean it. It's so foul, and they leave all their furniture behind, and they empty the refrigerator out all over the floor, and they're just mean. Baby diapers and food and all this crap everywhere. They just haul out what they want, shut the door. It's gross. But anyway, I'm not one of those. I know what it's like to be a landlord, and I'm not going to leave it like that. So, anyway, please, somebody do something and help these folks. And before I start renting, whether it's in Florida or any other state, rent control, rent control, rent control. Please, please. Thank you. And you guys do something kind for a stranger, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you.